Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
This is the time of year that so many people wait for. We have more daylight, the temperatures are getting warmer, and yes, it is also the time for spring allergies. So we know that seasonal allergies in this country really start to rev up in the spring. And this is when you start to have trees that are beginning to flower and they have all of these different pollens that are getting released into the air. And it really kind of varies from one part of the country to the next. But we certainly know that this is a really problematic time of year for so many people because you want to get outside and you want to enjoy those warmer temperatures and more daylight hours, but yet you're out there contending with all of these different allergens that are potentially creating a significant amount of havoc in your life. So I want to talk a little bit about springtime allergies and just give you some tips as to how you can approach this. So I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and I certainly myself have experienced this. I will say that since I have moved to Florida, ironically, I do not have the types of allergies that I had compared to when I lived in Michigan. In Michigan, it just never failed. As soon as springtime would hit, I would have the watery red eyes, the runny nose, the sneezing, the coughing, all of those irritations. I remember my ears would feel like they were really itchy, and it was just horrible in the broad sense of the word, because it seemed like it just lingered throughout the entire month, usually of April. And I remember just thinking to myself, gosh, when is this going to be over? Even though you're excited because the temperature is nice and you want to be outside, but you're still dealing with all of these pesky little pollens. So we know that many Americans are dealing with this. And when we look at the worldwide numbers, oh my goodness, it is astronomical when you think about allergies as a whole. And I'm not talking about like anaphylactic shock, like someone eats, a tree nut, like peanuts or something, and then they end up in having a, severe allergic reaction. We're talking about the common pesky seasonal allergies. And what we recognize in this country is that we have a whole heck of a lot of people that have this allergic rhinitis, often called hay fever or just the common, seasonal allergies. And this is really problematic because it can create certainly havoc in your life in terms of time loss from work, not being as productive as you would like to be because maybe you have a stuffy head and, your nose won't stop running and you keep, rubbing your eyes. All of these things can impact your day-to-day, normal function. And for many people, what they do is they turn to the over-the-counter antihistamines. Now, the problem with those is sometimes those come with their own nasty side effects. And we can look at, the way that they can impact neurotransmitter release. We can certainly look at just the things that people usually notice. If they have, a runny nose and they go and they take an antihistamine and the next thing they know, they're really dried up. And while you're happy because your nose is no longer running, but now you almost feel like you went to the polar opposite side and now you have a clogged nose. So we know that oftentimes people are looking for ways to mitigate this. And if you know that you are prone to those seasonal allergy changes, then you should be proactive in your approach to this and start to allow your immune system to kind of ready itself for the assault that is around the corner. So we look at things like probiotic, for example. We know that the Probiotic Hx in particular, that really lovely blend of those 5 different strains of probiotic, do so much when it comes to enhancing our immune system's way of fending off all of those things such as tree pollens. and grass pollens and all of the things that can trigger that allergic response. So that's first and foremost. Probiotic HX, definitely have that on board well before you even start to get into your, common allergy season. But when we look at the statistics, it's just astronomical. They estimate that more than 50 million Americans have some form of allergy throughout the year. And we know that springtime in particular is a very common time. And I've talked about this before when you have the different molds. And we know that there's even snow mold. So after, in places of the country where you've had really cold temperatures, and that snow actually can create its own mold, and it can stay on the grass. And you'll sometimes see like brown patches on the grass, and that's usually indicative that that's a snow mold. And those mold spores, they get into the air and then you breathe them in, which can really be problematic. So we know that this is the time when people really start to see these things rev up. And even think about, as the temperatures get warmer in certain parts of the country and people are using maybe their air conditioners, that is also potentially a source, because not only do we have the concerns for molds, but there are so many other allergens that can be pulled through those AC units and brought into your internal environment, not to mention everything that we track in from our clothes, from our shoes. So there's a lot of different ways in which we can get these exposures to all of these different pollens. I always revert back to when I lived in Atlanta. And they used to always say, oh, you just wait till allergy season and it's really, really bad here. And I kept thinking, well, how bad can it be? I, grew up in Michigan, and I know how I used to get every spring in Michigan. And sure enough, I woke up one morning and I looked out and it was just like everything was coated in yellow. And there was actually tracks in the road from people driving through all of the pollen. And it was just absolutely baffling to be like, oh my goodness, that much pollen. Luckily, I didn't get triggered by that, but many people in the greater Atlanta area certainly suffered during that time of year. And it's really a sight to see all of this pollen just kind of coat everything. It gets on the cars, it gets on houses, it's just all over the roads. It's just really quite wild. But we have to think about how we can ready the system. So I had mentioned probiotic HX. We know that that's really, really important to make sure that our immune system is at that ready, set, go. But then let's look at something like respiratory HX. So the name in and of itself kind of implies that this is going to be beneficial for the overall respiratory system. And we think part of the respiratory system is when we think about the nasal and the sinuses. So in this particular formulation, you have a blend of vitamin C, which we know is a very, very powerful antioxidant that does a wonderful job in terms of kind of impeding the way that histamine is released in the body. And we know that histamine is that main trigger, which is why people take antihistamines. But there are things from nature that work in that same manner. Vitamin C happens to be one of those. So for people who are impacted by any of those upper respiratory type symptoms, they will find that sometimes just adding in vitamin C during seasonal allergy time really can do an awful lot of benefit for them. Now, in this product, we also have mangosteen extract. Now, mangosteen is really cool. This is often nicknamed the queen of fruits or the food of the gods. And part of the reason why is because it's a superfood in its own right. It is packed with all of this wonderful amount of vitamins and minerals. I mean, it has things like magnesium and potassium and zinc and copper, vitamin C, your B vitamins, all packed in to this wonderful fruit. So when we use that fruit extract, we are still yielding all of those powerful immune support boosting benefits from that, which is why mangosteen has been utilized for hundreds and hundreds of years, because it is so rich in terms of all of these nutrients, the minerals and the vitamins, and it really helps to support and give this supercharge to our immune system. Now, within the respiratory HX, we also have quercetin, which is really very cool. Quercetin is a citrus bioflavonoid, and we find it in natural sources such as citrus fruit, but also in things like onions. And we know that quercetin is a really great way to support the respiratory system, as well as when we think specifically within the sinuses. And we also know with quercetin that it does a really remarkable job in terms of detoxification. So with exposures to different pollutants in the air besides just seasonal pollens, we know that quercetin is very, very targeted to help in that metabolic detoxification, which is a great thing. I always say when we're looking at things from nature, they're usually not just limited to one superb benefit for human health. It's usually multiple different ways in which these nutrients are working. And then we tap out the Respiratory Hx with nettle extract. And the nettle leaf extract really helps to promote this detoxification for the body to be able to remove all of those different pollens that we are breathing in. And so when you combine all of these in the Respiratory Hx, it really allows for the immune system to boost itself up, but also has the ability to detoxify at the same time, which is what makes it quite unique. And when you look at the different scientific studies that validate why we're using these nutrients in this particular formulation, it's really quite impressive. And a lot of the studies go far beyond that of just say seasonal allergies, but we definitely can see how things like quercetin can inhibit the expression of these different inflammatory cytokines and through the different mast cell lines, which is important because when we think about the way histamine itself is released, and we know that mast cells are mediating that allergic inflammatory response. And so what they have been able to detect is that quercetin can really downregulate that pathway in which histamine and inflammation is driven up. And this was published in the Inflammation Research Journal all the way back in 2007. So we certainly see that. But there's a real interesting study that was done out at the University of South Carolina, and they looked at quercetin having the ability to reduce the susceptibility to influenza infections. And once again, it was looking at its ability to downregulate that inflammation throughout the respiratory tract. And I think that for seasonal allergies, this is a bonus. The more that we can keep inflammation at bay, the less likely the immune system is going to overreact to any one trigger, even things such as tree pollens or the grasses or whatever it is that you may normally react to. So this is why when you look at the Respiratory Hx formula, people keep coming back year after year because once they start using it, they say, oh, here comes spring allergies. This is the time where I know I have all of these issues. And they start using Respiratory Hx and they say, oh my goodness, what a difference does this make? Certainly, we know that nettle extract has been looked at for a very long time in terms of clinical research trials and how it can help to downregulate, once again, the signs and symptoms of allergic rhinitis. And understanding that allergic rhinitis, hence hay fever, or if we just want to say seasonal allergies, is one of these major factors in the United States that creates all of this havoc. I mean, think about the millions and millions of people who suffer from this each and every single year. And allergies overall are the 6th leading cause of chronic illness in the United States. And the annual cost, the economic burden of allergies is just absolutely astronomical. Now, for many people, they just deal with it because they're like, oh, like how I was for many years in Michigan. It was like, I'll just deal with it. I didn't know at the time. I was in, junior high and high school. But for many people, they may get different times throughout the year. It may not just be limited to spring allergies. They may also get allergies in the fall. So we always want to make sure that the immune system is truly at the ready and we can not have to, once again, suffer year after year. If we take the appropriate measures and we say, hey, let's make sure that we have these really wonderful probiotics on board to, offset any of the immune over response that we know can occur due to these seasonal allergies. If we start taking that probiotic HX and then we add that respiratory HX on top of that, you're really setting yourself up for having a much better hand to play in the battle against seasonal allergies. There's so much research out there. We, see time and time again how much research and effort by different scientists in looking at different nutrients. And in the Environmental Health Perspectives Journal back in 2016, they were looking at seasonal allergies in regards to climate change and recognizing that they were starting to see a significant health burden and more people worldwide who were starting to be affected with allergic rhinitis, hence seasonal allergies, because of the change in different temperatures and the overall impact that was having on plant life, and hence driving up the exacerbation and the timing. For many people, it was limited to a certain amount of days that they would experience hay fever. And now maybe that time frame is extended by an extra 5-10 days that they are now suffering with those allergies. So we have to be aware of the multiple things that can impact seasonal allergies, and certainly changes in climate are playing a major role in that. But we do know that we can be doing the right things. We can have, high vitamin C foods into our diet, which shouldn't be difficult if you are adhering to a Mediterranean diet. But we can also take these other steps. We can look at things such as probiotic HX and respiratory HX and get those on board so that you can manage your way through this year's seasonal allergy season much more gracefully. So that is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. And do remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Now, do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.